Hello and welcome to Freedom Revamp. If it is your first time here, Freedom Revamp is a platform dedicated to helping others discover their sense of freedom internally and spiritually. Today we have a very special guest with us. Her name is Kaelin Tharpe. Kaelin is a mental health advocate and writer. Originally from Macon, Georgia, she now resides in Dallas, Texas. For years, she struggled with depression and anxiety. That is where she found her passion for writing and journaling. Thus, her personal blog, Control, was born. Her hope is that she helps other people find their voice through her experiences and speak up about mental health. So, without further ado, I am going to add Kaylin to the screen. Oh, how are
Hi,
you?
good. How are you?
I'm great. All right, so today's topic is closure.
Mhm.
Um, I saw you tweet, and I'm going to read the tweet first, and then we'll get into our questions. You
Okay.
said closure is really a scam. You really are trying to validate feelings from another person. Wow, ghetto. So, for those of you who are wondering how we came up with the topic, that is how we got here. Before we get into that, though, when we start our shows, we always ask everyone, how do you define freedom? So, first, I'm going to let you start by answering that.
I define freedom, and I think I probably say this every time, but I think it's just about being transparent. It's being open, being honest, being yourself, sharing your story. I think that's how you find freedom in so many things. By sharing what you've experienced or what you've been through, or just being honest with people, like when you talk to them. So because you never know who else you're helping, and I think also you're freeing yourself while freeing someone else. So.
Yes, I can actually 100% agree with that. And with that definition in mind, I'm going to ask you, how do you practice freedom?
I think I do it a lot in my writing. So on my blog, I always make sure that like when I'm writing something, like sometimes I'm scared if I'm oversharing, but I feel like there's no such thing as oversharing when you are on this platform that is all about being transparent and being honest with other people that are reading your stories. So that's one way, and also just with my friends and conversations, just being as honest as I can possibly be, and never feeling like there's nothing that I can't share with somebody else.
Okay, I definitely agree. I think for me, like I define freedom the same every time. I'm practicing freedom by being 100% myself. But
Hmm.
I feel like it's different seasons in my life where I have to practice it differently. So sometimes I have to become more understanding with myself. Other times I have to become more understanding with those around me. So it's just my definition always remains the same, but how I practice it definitely varies throughout my life and throughout the different seasons that I'm in.
Yeah.
So once again, guys, the topic of today is closure, and we read the tweet already. Closure is really a scam. So, can you give us just a little bit more insight onto why you think this way or why you even tweeted this tweet?
Because I feel like so many times, like before I knew any better, I was always trying to like seek closure. I never wanted to end things on bad terms. I always wanted to make sure there was this last conversation, to just be like, okay, let's just clear the air and make sure everything's good. But I realized as I got older and I put myself in different situations, it was always just me trying to validate the feelings that I thought someone else had, or the feelings that I had, and trying to see if they'd be like, oh no, like maybe they changed their mind. A lot of times I think that was really it too. I was like, maybe if I say this and we have this last conversation and it's all sad and somber, they'll be like, okay, you know what? Maybe I'll change my mind. But it's like, no, the person has already really shown you so much up until that point. There's a reason that the situation's over, anyways.
So, I definitely can say that in the past, I have like sought closure with people, be it, platonic relationships, familiar relationships, whatever it is. So, have you always had the mindset that you don't really need to get closure from other people, or did it kind of come from certain lessons?
No, I was definitely always that person, like, I need closure, like, we need to, like, because again, I was always just, like, so I don't wanna end on bad terms. I don't want you to have anything negative to say about me. I want us to, like, have a conversation or have the last word. So, up until maybe this year, I always felt like I needed closure. I'm like, "Dang, at 25, I had to realize, like, you really don't need that."
Yeah.
So
Like I said, like when I read your tweet, I was like, okay, hold up. Because I'm the type of person, it's like I do want to have my feelings heard, but I also want to hear other people's feelings. And now, in the process of discovering freedom and practicing it, it's like, okay, maybe you don't always have to explain yourself, Kourtney. And likewise, if someone hurts you, then sometimes it's just better to move on without it, honestly.
truly.
So that leads me to my next question. Do you believe that there are other ways to gain closure outside of having a conversation with whoever the other person is?
I think it's so many different options to choose from. I think one is just like having that conversation with yourself. Like what is it that you're seeking from this person? Why do you feel like you need closure so bad? And that can stem from like so many different things. So I think journaling is like a healthy way to do that. Therapy, maybe bouncing it off of a friend. I don't know, even if you want to sit and like talk to yourself and talk it out loud to yourself, I think is another thing. But I think it's just stems from something so deep. So it may be like a process, but there's so many different avenues to like figure out how to get from that point of feeling like you need to have closure.
I agree. I think for me, a way I would seek closure without having to talk to the other person is like I said, like you talked about not having to validate the other person's feelings or having them validate yours. I think I would have to sit with my feelings and
Mhm.
understand them in order to navigate through them. And that would create internal closure outside of whatever I had going on with that person.
And I think that's another thing. I feel like a lot of times we don't really like sit with our feelings. We just
Yeah.
be like, okay, and then we try to like brush over them. And it's like it's okay to feel whatever it is that you feel in that moment. Just don't let it consume you. But like you can sit in your feelings. I think it's healthy, honestly, to do
I
that.
think it is. I think sometimes we don't want to because we'll end up having feelings that we consider bad or feelings that we don't like. But that's another conversation because we don't right. We don't sit with our feelings enough. But when I initially read the tweet, I immediately thought you were talking about platonic relationships such as, boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife,
Mhm.
etc. But do you believe that getting closure is important in other forms of relationships, such as with family members or friends, or do you kind of have the same mindset?
I think all any kind of relationship deserves some type of like internal closure within yourself. So whether it's a friend or your sister or your mom, like you have to like find it because if not, it's gonna pop up 2 years down the road and you're gonna be trying to figure out like why do I still feel like there's something this person keeps popping up in my head. So like you have to. I know some people are like real cutthroat and they can just cut friends off and just keep moving, or they can cut family off and just keep moving. But I think you got to find a closure some way somehow.
I agree because like you said, it'll pop up later on. Like sometimes when I haven't had conversations with people because before I became the person that felt like I needed to validate everyone's feelings, I was the person who just was like, okay, let me just cut them off, forget about them. But now it's like you said, they'll pop up in your brain late years later, and I'm like, okay, see, this ain't it. So just working on that, right? Working on that for myself.
Mhm.
So one of the final questions, what advice would you give to someone who feels they need others to validate their feelings?
I would say figure out where that feeling is coming from. One, try to pinpoint why do you feel that way. It could be something from your childhood. It could be the way someone talked to you 10 years ago, or like someone made you feel less than 2 years or whatever the situation is. Like, you have to pinpoint, why do you feel like you need that validation so much? And not saying that there's anything wrong with validation. We all need it sometimes, but there is possible to have multiple feelings and feel two different ways. Like, you can be confident and still want that validation, but you still need to figure out, like, why do I need this validation so much, so hard from this person who I don't even need to be talking to anymore. Like, this chapter is closed. So I think just trying to figure out where it stems from. What's the center? Where does it come from? Why do you feel that way? And journaling is 10 out of 10 recommend to figure that out.
Yes. So, final thing I'm going to ask you, because this was such a great conversation, and I'm pretty sure people are going to want to hear more of what you have to say. So, how can people keep up with Kaelin Tharpe?
So you can follow me on Instagram. It's going to be Kaelin, so Kaelin with 2 underscores. That is my main Instagram. But if you want to read stories and figure out how to be more transparent, gaining control. So it'll be GAININGKONTROL. And those both are on Instagram.
Yes, every time you post something on Gaining Control, I'm like, ooh, gotta read. And then she also posts playlists with each volume of writing, and I'm like, okay, let me go add this playlist because they're so amazing. So I'm so excited for you and all that you're doing because you're touching people that you don't even know you're touching. So I do want to thank you so much for joining us today. It was truly amazing as always.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, of course. And thank you everyone who is tuning in. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and make sure you keep up with Kaelin. Until next time, that is all.
Bye.